Hey, everyone, this is Tommie Earl Jenkins, and welcome to the very first episode of Joy to the Word, the Death Stranding edition. Listen, I am so excited for this. This is going to be the first of a 10-part series where we will be delving into the world of Death Stranding via the character interviews. Now, this is a chance for those of you who've played the game, and also for those of you who haven't played it yet, to hear some backstory and in-depth information on how some of these characters have come together and how some of these relationships were actually forged, as well as the history behind the Death Stranding, and how some of these characters pretty much just came to be. Now, in this first episode, we're going to be looking at those interviews that have been given from those people who were a part of the Bridges staff. Now, there are 13 interviews in total. Now, these interviews, you'll notice that they say 1 year ago, 2 years ago, or 15 years ago. Now, I presume that these interviews will date from which year the game is set. Now, I'm not 100% sure on what exact year Death Stranding takes place, but I believe it could be in the future, perhaps 2047, 2050, roughly. I'm not sure, so I think these will be based upon that timeline. But don't shoot the messenger. You know, I was in the game, but I don't know the answers to everything. So I'm just still finding out a lot of information that I didn't actually know or was aware of. I played the game, but I pretty much have to go back and play it again and really pay attention this time. I just kind of plowed through on easy, and it was so hard for me to figure out the controls and everything. And of course, when BB starts to cry, I got anxiety, and all that kicks in. God, it just got crazy. Anyway, the interview we're going to be covering, the titles are 2 years ago, Distribution Center west of Capital Knot City, Timefall and Power Failures, The Lake at Ground Zero, Interview with the Geologist, Interview with the Paleontologist, Interview with the Evo Devil Biologist, Tar Bubbles Up from the Beach, Chiralium Coatings, Oxytocin, Why Planes and Drones Can't Fly, Antimatter in Storage, The President's Ghost #1, and The President's Ghost #2. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get started and dive in. I'm going to get my glasses on. Give me a little bit of intellect, apparently. Listen, so like I said, we're going to start with the first interview dealing with the Bridges staff. Now, Bridges, if you're not aware, and pretty much everyone has heard the name, I'm sure, by this point, but Bridges is the company that was formed to reconnect the fractured society of the United States of America. That company also bears a close relation to a conglomerate that is named the United Cities of America, which we've come to also know as the UCA. And you can tell by the logo, apparently that's on the red carpet in the Oval Office, and it's also the company badge. Die Hardman has it on his lapel. I think Sam has it. And it's basically the presidential seal, if you will. Within that company, they have some divisions. Bridges has a field unit that mainly deals with the recovery or delivery of bodies, which is the Corpse Disposal Team 6. Bridges also has a unit that focuses on medicine and treatment, which you will be able to notice when you see them in their red suits. They're like Dr. Scrubs. You see them early on in the game as well when they are taking care of President Bridget Strand. So, this first interview, entitled 2 years ago, Distribution Center west of Capital Knot City. The interviewee is Benjamin Hancock. Now, he is a porter and the leader of the Distribution Center west of Capital Knot City, who at some point Sam delivers materials to him, which I think Sam pretty much delivers materials to most people. He also owned a bridge baby, apparently, with whom he got attached. He confesses this to Sam via an email. Now, some of this stuff that I'm going to be reading, you'll be able to find on the wiki pages and all of that if you want to spend a little bit more time. But just giving you a little bit of a backstory. This interview takes place 2 years ago at the Distribution Center west of Capital Knot City. And this is what Benjamin Hancock had to say. It's been about a year now since we came here with the rear guard. The first folks through did us the favor of setting up the Cairo relay and patching things up before we arrived. So, we're doing all right. Not so sure about everyone else, though. Folks back home sound kinda freaked out. We don't know what's going on in Central or Capital, let alone how Amelie and the others who kept heading west are doing. But something doesn't feel right. What's more, a lot of the guys have developed some kind of agoraphobia, like the thought alone of going outside scares the shit out of them. See, the distro centers and way stations around these parts here aren't like the ones back east. They're much more isolated, out in the middle of nowhere. Can't help but feel cut off from the world. And there's not a lot of staff on hand neither, which means you often have to do the work of two guys, which can make it that much lonelier too. And then you factor in the terrorism rumors. Also, is it just me or does it feel like there's more mules out here these days? Don't get me wrong. I know they're not out to get us. All they want is our cargo, right? Well, that doesn't change the fact that they're not making our work any easier, especially since a lot of these guys used to be first-rate porters and could run rings around us if they hadn't, you know? Still, for now, the network systems are up and running, and we're just holding out for the day when the second expedition comes through with a working Cupid. Till then, we'll keep things chugging along. That much we can do. For bridges and country. Am I right? So that was given by Benjamin Hancock. Now, what I noticed, what I didn't realize is that the mules were apparently at some point first-rate porters. Now, I may have missed that information when it was given to me, but it's interesting to know that they were once porters as well. So what made them become mules? Were they cast out, or were they fired from the company? Or, you know, it'd be interesting dialogue to open to figure out what happened there. So by all means, shoot your questions at the bottom. The other thing that I was interested was knowing about agoraphobia. Now, I did look this up, and the definition that came up was extreme or irrational fear of entering open or crowded places, of leaving one's home, or of being in places from which escape is difficult. I mean, I can't imagine that. I'm such an outgoing person. The fear of leaving my home would probably absolutely just cripple me, I think. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of what people must feel like. So I thought that was an interesting thing, considering that, Death Stranding deals with such open landscape and everything, and the fear of going out, and probably the fear of going out for what might happen. You know, you were dealing with the BTs and the possibility of void outs, timefall, all of that sort of stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Moving on to the next interview entitled Timefall and Power Failures. This interview was given by Igor Frank. Igor Frank was also a member of Corpse Disposal Team 6 of the Corpse Disposal Division of Bridges, and he's also the younger brother of Victor Frank and a survivor of the Death Stranding. He was known for collecting little keepsakes, and it was his dream to go west with the second expedition. And we'll talk about his brother Frank Victor. There's Igor Frank and Victor Frank. Right now we're dealing with Igor. We'll talk a little bit more about Victor because he comes up. But this particular interview was 3 years ago, and it took place at Central Knot City. And he had this to say. He said, I volunteered to join Bridges, signed up with my brother, Victor. See, we both remembered when America was still America. We still had planes and satellites, when we were still connected to everyone and everything. The world was different. It was bigger, and we wanted it back. Now, he was chosen for the first expedition and hit the road damn near straight away. But me, I got told to hang back here in Central, which was okay, I guess. Corpse disposal means taking your fair share of timefall in the line of duty. You get a sense for it after a while. A sixth sense for when the clouds are about to open up. Of course, the clouds themselves are a big tell, and an inverse rainbow's a guarantee you are in for some shit. But there are smaller signs too. Changes in the air, a smell on the wind. When it hits, you've got power outages to deal with. As far as I understand it, which ain't all that far, it's to do with high concentrations of chiralium causing electromagnetic interference or something, which also interacts with water and kicks up clouds of ozone, which then makes the temperature drop like a rock. Anyway, I may be used to timefall, but that don't mean I'm immune to it. Believe me, I'm younger than I look. Hey, my big bro would take a lot of pleasure in telling you that if he could see me now. So his big brother would take a lot of pleasure in telling us that if he could see him now. So there's obviously been some changes to Igor. So thinking about this particular interview, Timefall and Power, I found it very interesting that about the signs that warn you of timefall. One major one is the inversed rainbow, which really meant that the shit was about to go down. So if you saw that, I think you pretty much knew there was going to be some crazy stuff going on. And definitely something to watch out for. Also, we know the effects of timefall. You know, it causes the aging. And that's always a very interesting thing, because whenever you're in the game and you know that timefall is about to happen, you know, the whole thing is about getting Sam to shelter and making sure he's safe and giving him a place to rest until that sort of passes over. We've seen what happens once timefall hits animals and living things. It pretty much decimates them. So very interesting. Very interesting stuff indeed. Once again, stuff to really make you think about things differently. Moving on to the next one, which is the lake at Ground Zero. Now, this one interview is given by Victor Frank. We're now hearing from Victor, whose brother we just heard from, which was Igor. So Victor is head of the distribution in Port Knot City. At some point, Sam delivers an aid package to Victor, and Victor is the older brother of Igor. Now, this interview was 2.5 years ago and took place at Port Knot City. And Victor states, "When I first laid eyes on the lake here at Ground Zero, I was blown away by the sheer size of it. I never imagined anything could be so huge. This was just after the Death Stranding, and not many people had seen the craters up close yet. Back when I was still living with my parents and my brother on the East Coast, an explosion like nothing the world had seen before tore a gaping hole in the heart of America. I mean, there were all kinds of rumors floating around at the time, that it was a meteor, that it was a nuke dropped by another country. You know, I was just a kid, but even I could tell the adults didn't have a clue. So you can imagine how I felt. And then we found out there had been other explosions, not just here in America, but the world over. By the time we learned they were void outs and what void outs were, the country was pretty much done. But hey, that was then and this is now. And things are looking up. You know, I just got told my kid brother's still alive. Word is he's heading up a corpse disposal team in Capital Knot City. Handled his shit well enough to get picked for the second expedition. 3 more years and he'll be out here with me. I can't wait to see him again." So that was Victor Frank. Now, one of the things that I thought about in this was, you know, here we talk about the explosions and the void outs. And the void outs are such a major thing. You know, these explosions happen, and it's kind of defined as an explosive annihilation event that occurs when a BT consumes a human. Now, that's pretty crazy, because when you stop and think about, you know, is it just this one particular BT that consumes this one particular person that is going to literally cause an entire void out across the country, or is it across the world? So I imagine growing up in a world with this happening for these guys, you know, they remember all of this happening when they were kids. And, you know, that's a long time ago based on where they are now. So this is something that happened. And, you know, when you see the game, you see the size of the craters and it's massive, you know, but this explosion was so incredible and so detrimental and catastrophic. You know, this is one of the reasons why I think that, you know, it's about Sam taking that journey, you know, having to reconnect everything and what it did to the chiral network. So once again, opening up the dialogue to some very interesting questions, some conspiracy theories, I'm sure, which are happening. But yeah, something once again to think about. So I'm going to move on to the next interview with the geologist. The geologist is a Bridges researcher living in the mountains south of Hartman's lab and Mountain Knot City. Sam initially meets him to deliver some chiralium contamination medicine. According to his name tag, his real name is Thomas Huxley. Thomas Huxley. This interview takes place 1 year ago in a personal shelter. And the geologist, aka Thomas Huxley, has this to say. I remember it was just before I joined the expedition when I found those documents in Bridges HQ. Research papers that predated the Death Stranding. People used to believe that dinosaurs had gone extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. But when this fella investigated various locations where late Cretaceous dino fossils had been found, he came to the startling conclusion that there were hardly any evidence anywhere on Earth that supported the theory that dinosaurs had survived until the end of the Cretaceous. In other words, almost all of them had been wiped out long before that. The only place where there were fossils that did support the traditional theory was here in North America, which suggested that this was the last part of the Earth to have been inhabited by dinosaurs. Now, not everyone agreed with this analysis at the time, but let's say he had it right. That would mean that there is evidence of a mass extinction hidden here, right beneath our feet. Evidence which could prove invaluable in understanding the one on the horizon. Now, did the dinosaurs who happened to live here just get lucky? Or is there something special about this place that allowed them to survive? I'd love to get to the bottom of it, but I'm not sure that I have what it takes. I'm not like Hartman. I don't have dooms or any other unique traits. Still, I want to make myself useful. I want to research the Stranding and help uncover the truth behind it. That's why I joined the expedition team after all. So, here we have the geologist with some very interesting things. Now, what I did find interesting about this was that what intrigued me was there was a phrase in this interview that I was kind of like, what does that mean or what is that referring to? I don't know if you caught it, but for me, it was when he says, which could prove invaluable in understanding, quote unquote, the one on the horizon. Now, I felt confused because I was like, well, what are we referring to? Are we getting into a biblical sense? Are we referring to, as in meeting, earth to heaven? Is it referring to God or some spiritual entity or hierarchy? And I just thought that was interesting because it's the one on the horizon. I couldn't quite figure out who or what that was. So if anyone has an idea about that, please enlighten me on that. Leave that comment below and let me know what you think it is. But I thought that was the thing that really stuck out to me with this. And he talks about dooms, but that's something that we'll get into later because there will be a lot of information regarding that. Go ahead and moving on. The next one up is an interview with the paleontologist. Now, the paleontologist, also known as Edward Wallace. The paleontologist is a Bridges researcher who's also living in the mountains south of Hartman's lab and Mountain Knot City. Sam apparently initially meets him to deliver an antimatter bomb to clear tar for excavation of fossils. This interview was 1 year ago and also took place in a personal shelter. And he states, in the period since the very first forms of life arose here on Earth, the planet has witnessed a number of mass extinctions. And as you're no doubt aware, the most significant of these are known as the Big Five. The first marked the end of the Ordovician period, while the next, at the end of the Devonian period, wiped out almost all marine life. But the third of these extinction, at the end of the Permian period around 250 million years ago, was even worse. 96% of all marine organisms and 70% of land organisms died as a result. The fourth extinction finished off most large reptiles, though the dinosaurs managed to hold on until the fifth came along at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. We humans are evolved from the small mammals which managed to survive that particular catastrophe. Now, each of these five extinctions resulted from enormous changes to the natural environment. Species which were unable to adapt to these changes perished, while those which were ideally situated to evolve and thrive did just that. Evidence from records which predate the Death Stranding indicate that many scholars believed a sixth mass extinction was on its way, or that it may have already begun. There was something of a consensus regarding its cause as well: humanity's destruction of the environment. This led them to sound the alarm, warning the world of what was at stake. At the time, the greatest minds of the era believed that if the ecosystem could be preserved and if humanity could learn to live in harmony with nature, then a future could be secured for all the world's species, humans included. But that was then, and this is now. If the phenomenon we are currently experiencing is indeed the sixth extinction, then it must be acknowledged that humanity is its main target. Is this divine punishment for our misdeeds? If so, then I suppose there is little that can be done. Perhaps there's no way forward for humanity now. Nevertheless, I refuse to give up. I will endeavor to find hope in our predicament. So this was Edward Wallace, the paleontologist. And this really kind of struck a chord with me because I pretty much think that, this is dealing with global warming, dealing with the destruction of our environment. The sixth mass extinction, and he goes on to talk about it being humanity's destruction of the environment. I mean, honestly, what else can we call it? We're living in a time now where we are dealing with so much stuff with, the ozone layer, the marine life being affected by pollution in the water. The list just goes on and on. So I thought this was very interesting, and his wanting and his determination to keep his hope alive, and endeavoring to find the hope in our predicament, which I think is something that we all, or I should say most of us probably feel that it's never too late. It's not too late to try and fix what we've done. I think it is a practice that we must try and think about things that are affecting our environment, our planet, and I think things are making changes. I know that here in Los Angeles, they're in 10 years' time hoping to have nothing but electrical cars, which I think is a huge step and quite incredible. So I too believe that we should all keep the hope alive and try and save our world. Something to definitely to think about. Once again, so many of these interviews spark up a debate and topic of conversation that hopefully we can all get on board and really think about. That's the one thing that I find incredibly amazing about this game, Death Stranding. It deals with so many current things without really, Kojima's on really what it feels like it was ahead of its time, but at the same in the same point, it is so spot on. So spot on. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next interview with the Evil Devil biologist. The Evil Devil biologist is a Bridges researcher living in the mountains southwest of Hartman's lab. Now, according to her name tag, her full name is Mary Dickens. This interview took place 1 year ago in a personal shelter as well. And she states, I was born after the death stranding, so my conception of what the world once was is derived entirely from documents, photographs, and video. We didn't used to have timefall, for one, just regular rain. No chiral clouds, only the traditional masses of suspended moisture, and one certainly didn't have to worry about tar bubbling up from underground in most locales. Humans could travel anywhere, even into space, and we were blissfully unaware of the beach's existence. Suffice it to say, there is no doubt that this is a period of sweeping change that will have everlasting repercussions for all life on Earth. Given that dooms may simply be humanity's way of trying to adapt and survive. A beach exists within the consciousness of every individual. But these environmental changes, they affect all life on a genetic level, do they not? That is why I thought to investigate them, and the medium through which I chose to do so is the tar, which has become so ubiquitous. But you're not interested in that, I'm sure. So you know, there is a very real possibility that we have already failed to adapt to the sixth extinction. That we are but another evolutionary dead end soon to be left behind. If that is the case, then it could be reasoned that the ones afflicted with dooms and therefore blessed with an enhanced perception of the beach are our successors, who will survive and supplant us. I suppose that would be a shame, but it doesn't trouble me all that much. My research will survive me as well, and the doom sufferers can pick up from where I left off. They will carry on my genetic lineage too, for that matter. No, what worries me is that not even dooms will prove sufficient to endure this extinction. If that is the case, then humanity is doomed. It's certainly a possibility we have to acknowledge. But more than that, one question looms above all. Why? Why now? Why like this? That's what I want to know more than anything. Somehow I doubt the dinosaurs and all the other species that came and went ever considered that question. Worrying over the reason for this and that is a uniquely human condition, I suppose. Yet this idle curiosity may be the key to understanding and overcoming the stranding. Wow. So, with the Evil Devil biologist, we talk a lot about dooms. And just so you know, for those who don't, dooms is defined as a condition that grants an individual a connection to the other side, to the other life. And these people who have dooms are also called sufferers. And I think that's interesting because you would think that being able to, having dooms is something that's an incredible thing to be able to do to have that connection to the other side, I suppose in a way that's far superior than someone who's like a clairvoyant or a psychic or anything like that. Seems more physical to actually go to the other side. But also what happens to them, I can understand why they are called sufferers. I mean, and then now we also get into repatriation. And in order to repatriate, That is defined as being able to bring yourself back to life from death. To be able to repatriate is bringing yourself back to life. And as far as I am aware, I think that Sam in the game is the only person who can do that. Put your questions and comments below. But I think we've seen what happens to him when he repatriates. If you've played the game, what happens is it's this whole process. It's like going down a rabbit hole, but going through hell in the same process, and then bringing yourself back up and having to regurgitate and all of that stuff. It is a process. So I would find, yes, I can see why they would be called also a sufferer, because I would find that something to be incredibly suffering to do. But yeah, interesting. Moving on. The next one is tar bubbles up from the beach. This interviewee is Aaron Hill. Aaron Hill is a member of Bridges who is currently stationed at Mountain Knot City. However, Sam will have to deal with Lochner first before meeting Aaron. This information was put on Wiki. And that's going to get into a whole nother territory, dealing with Lochner, because we have stuff about her coming up as well. Anyway, Aaron Hill, this interview was done 1 year ago, and it took place at Mountain Knot City. And he states, I'd heard this area was pretty inhospitable before I got here. Got your fair share of mountains, obviously, and on top of that were all these rumors about a secret terrorist base or something. So I figured I was in for a bad time. But when me and the team got here, yeah, it was way worse than what we thought. Felt like we could get jumped any second, you know? I'll tell you what, though. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw all the tar out west. Wondered how the hell Amelie and her team made it through, but someone said it wasn't nearly as bad when they made the trip. I was sent out to take a closer look. And man, it was something else. And it hadn't been that long either. I mean, it's hard to imagine all that bubbled up damn near overnight. Honestly, I felt like I was standing at the edge of the world. We don't know much about the tar, except that it wasn't around before the Stranding. Same as Timefall and chiralium. You know, there's some speculation that it might be some byproduct of the beach, and that if you could somehow retrace the flow, you'd end up there. But that's all theoretical stuff. Right now, we've got a practical problem to deal with. One of the chiral relays we built is at risk of going under any moment. We don't have the manpower to relocate it yet, but we should once the second expedition shows up. Now, whether we can wait that long is another question, though. Maybe you could tell them to get their asses in gear if you get a chance. So Aaron, like I said, who is a member of Bridges and is stationed at Mountain Knot City. This was interesting dealing with the tar, because we come to know that the tar never appeared before the Death Stranding took place. I believe that it is connected to the beach. We've kind of seen how Sam gets dealt with the tar getting pulled under and coming up at the beach, and you know, I think that there has to be something that tells us that yes, it is connected to the beach somehow. I don't know. What do you think? Would it be possible to trace the flow back to see if it actually leads you to the beach? Is that possible? To find where it begins and then trace it? Wouldn't that mean having to go through the dooms, dying and getting to the beach? I'm not sure. But it seems like it would be a very difficult process to find out where it leads to. And I think the only way, once again, I'm just throwing it out there, that the only way to get there is through having dooms, because that takes you to the beach and then having to repatriate if you have that ability. Because once, if you don't have the ability to repatriate, then, you get sucked under by a BT and in the beach and in the other realms, unable to return. You're just dead. Is kind of how I see it. So once again, those things are incredibly interesting. So if you feel like how it would be to retrace the flow and find out where you think that would lead, let me know. Let me know. Moving on to the next one, which is the chiralium coatings. This interview was done with George Baton or George Baton. He is a person with affiliations to the UCA, the United Cities of America, who is currently stationed at a way station west of Capital Knot City. And at some point, he delivers materials to, Sam delivers materials to him as well. This interview took place 2 years ago at the way station west of Capital Knot City. And George has this to say. Truth is, we discovered it by dumb luck. Folks had made a point of building cities outside of timefall regions, but the way stations and the distro centers were a different story. No way around it, really. Even through all that exposure meant they'd deteriorate quicker. But when you're keeping an eye out for things deteriorating, you soon noticed how chiralium crystals react when exposed to timefall, which is to say, not at all. They showed no signs of degradation whatsoever, stayed rock solid even after getting soaked. It sort of made sense. Chiralium comes from the beach, right? And over there, time doesn't pass. Timefall had no effect on the crystals because they may as well exist outside of time. And when we ran a few experiments, that's pretty much what we confirmed. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why not build way stations out of chiralium, right? Yeah, if only. Turns out, overexposure to that stuff is lethal, and it can't be stored in large quantities either. Still, at least the chiralium coatings we came up with do just enough to keep the rot manageable. That's something. Wow. So chiralium, to me, feels like it's one of those products that could be like asbestos or lead. The way that he describes it in terms that, the effects too, you can't have too much of it. Too much of it is lethal, but you can have just enough of it to manage the rot. Excuse me. Like I said, I feel like it could be like lead or asbestos or something. And the lethalness of it, I mean, obviously there has to be a huge deal or a huge amount of it to create something like that. But obviously creating the coating was a breakthrough and clearly a saving grace because they were able to manage the rot with just enough. So imagine if they were able to find a way to use it, because he says, well, yeah, why not build way stations out of chiralium? And if you could build stuff out of that, it would be an incredible breakthrough because it just you wouldn't be affected by the timefall, I suppose, in a way. But maybe being able to use it just enough as a coating on the outside would protect the materials underneath, and I suppose that's enough, and that's all they kind of need at the moment. So, but yeah, chiralium coatings. So leave your thoughts and questions below about that, and let me know what you think. Moving on to Oxytocin. Now, we're going back to an interview with Victor Frank. Victor, like I said, is the head of distribution at Port Knot City, and at some point, Sam delivers an aid package to Victor. This interview was done 1 year ago at Mountain Knot City. And Victor has this to say. Back before the Stranding, people didn't rely on smart drugs like oxytocin so much, probably because they weren't so damn isolated. Me and my brother Igor, we got separated from our folks after the first void out. Shit was crazy. I was just a kid, but he was even younger. Too young to have to go through all that. Spending night after night holed up in those ruins, it was rough. But we had each other, held each other close to stay warm, and it made things better. Docs would tell you that oxy's doing its thing. The hormone the body releases when we touch each other. It's why mothers form bonds with their kids when they hold them, and other stuff like that. But with the comms networks, not what they were, it's more dangerous than ever to go outside, and even when you got other people around, they don't seem too keen to make physical contact. A collective aversion due to an ingrained fear of BTs and void outs. Or so I've been told. Add it all up, and you got yourself a people that's isolated, scattered, stressed out, and insecure. So, we've got no choice but to supplement our oxy levels. Fill the void left by physical affection with chemical TLC. It's pretty fucked up, am I right? I know we used to go to war over race and religion and all that back in the day, but that had to be better than living like this. And that makes you think, that last bit saying that, filling the void left by physical affection with chemical TLC. It's pretty fucked up. Yes, it is. I know we used to go to war over race and religion all back in the day, but that had to be better than living like this. Well, to be fair, I think we're still going through wars over race and religion, to be absolutely fair about that. Filling the void left by physical affection with chemical TLC. That touches on a lot of things. I know we're talking about oxytocin. I'm going to come back to that. But dealing with, people are dealing with drugs in this day and age, both for recreational purposes and for living and for health, medicinal purposes. And it's amazing what they do. Now, apparently, getting a chemical TLC from this has taken its toll on these people. And I also believe that it takes its toll on where we are today with drugs and all of the painkillers that people are taking. It's a myriad of things. So I think that comparing that, it's interesting that his comparison is, is it better to be afflicted with chemical TLC, or going to war over race and religion? That's big. But interesting enough, so about the oxytocin, it says that it's a hormone released by the pituitary gland that causes increased contraction of the uterus during labor and stimulates the ejection of milk into the ducts of the breasts. Women typically have a higher oxytocin level than men, but biological differences aside, men and women appear to experience oxytocin in many of the same ways. It acts as a neurotransmitter. It plays an important role in reproduction. In females, the hormone triggers labor and the release of breast milk, but in males, oxytocin helps move sperm. So that's interesting, and how all of that comes into play. So it's not just about the women, but I think in the context of the game, I think we do relate it a lot to what happens. And I think Mama and Lochna, there's a connection with all of that there. But once again, you can, look this stuff up, check out the wiki pages and see what people are saying. And it's very interesting. But though that definition I did pull specifically because I wanted to understand exactly what oxytocin was, how it acted, and if it was indeed from both men and women, or if it was just from women. Anyway, but once again, the door is open for discussion. Moving on to the next one, why planes and drones can't fly. This was an interview by Igor. We're back to Igor again. Like I said, he's the member of Bridges Corpse Disposal, working under the Corpse Disposal Team 6. In the aftermath of a suicide case, he was entrusted with delivering the body to the nearest incinerator. But since the road to the incinerator had a high BT presence, he was issued a bridge baby. Who knew? A bridge baby, BB-28. Igor would reach out to Sam since he required someone with dooms to gauge the condition of the body. Now, I would suggest reading a little bit more about him and figuring out a little bit more about BB-28 and why he required someone with dooms to gauge the condition of the body. Find that information out. Your mission, go find that information out and bring it to me. And let me know. Anyway, carrying on with this interview. So this interview was 1 year ago, and it took place at Central Knot City. And Igor states in this, you know what I wanted to be when I was a kid? An astronaut. Believe it or not. It must be hard to imagine now, but back before the stranding, the skies were full of drones, airplanes, all kinds of crap zipping back and forth from continent to continent. Some that even went up into outer space. But the Cairo clouds put an end to all that. Nothing flies now. It all came crashing down, and my dreams with it. Damn clouds mess with flight systems somehow. Don't ask me how. Eat up comm signals too, which is how come long-distance signals can't get through anymore. Now, that's why we've got no idea what's happening in other countries. Set us back more than a century in that respect. Now, people talk a lot about how the stranding sent us scrambling for the cities, severed the bonds between us, but it did more than that. It severed the land from the sky. Wow. It severed the land from the sky. And I'm going to take on that is that it means no longer having that connection. The joy and the privilege of being able to, and what we take for granted. You know, imagine us now not being able to fly or to, visually see rockets go into outer space, travel to other countries and see people. You know, that is an incredible thing that we have. But imagine now, I mean, it's just that line that he says, it severed the land from the sky, and that is such a big thing, that whole disconnect, I can't imagine where we would be without travel in that sense, in the sense of going up. Not so much it's obviously affected, going cross country or anything like that, but it's about, venturing into the sky, into the atmosphere, into the stratosphere. So they're saying that it set them back more than a century. So the stranding really was, it really fucked shit up, to be blunt. And what these people had to deal with. I don't think any of us doubt that, but I just think it's pretty interesting and how much of an impact. Today, like I said, we take so much for granted for what we have in this world, that it's been given to us. We've grown up in a time where, things were one way. And for those people, it's interesting. Here's the thing. For those people who are growing up in a time where iPads, iPhones, touch this, touch that, instant gratification, things moving very quickly, it's all they know, the having mobile telephones, now. When there was a time with me growing up, iPads didn't exist, iPhones didn't exist, any kind of touch screen hadn't really existed. Things were starting to break through at some point, but You know, imagine now those people growing up with that. I'm at an age where I've been able to see both. I've seen without and with. So when shit breaks down for me, I'm like, I'll just revert back to my old self because that's what I used to do. If my phone breaks down and I can't access my calendar, I'll write in my diary, which I still do to this very day. I will always. I have this thing about writing in my diary, my journal, or my daily planner, whatever you want to call it. I can open it up and I can see my week or my month's schedule. And I'm sure you can do that. You can do that when you're looking at your computer and looking at your iCalendar and all that sort of stuff. But there's something, just, I don't know if it's the tangible, that I can, open it up, flick through those pages, make my notes in my own handwriting and know what it means. I can abbreviate. I can, write in a way that no one else will understand it, but I know. And you can't do that necessarily on modern technology. So I miss that, and I love that. But we do take for granted what we have. And what I was going to say about living in both time periods, living through both before that, the modern technology that we have now, growing up as a kid, and and in the current day, I feel like I'm okay to switch back. I'm not sure that most people who grew up in this time know how to switch back as a fallback. So once again, that's something that's up for discussion. So drop those things in the comments below and let me know what you think about that. Let's move on to Antimatter in Storage. This is an interview from Philip North. Philip North is the head of distribution at the distribution center north of Mountain Knot City. It took place 1 year ago at the distribution center north of Mountain Knot City. And Philip has this to say. Said everything went like clockwork, and we recovered all the antimatter. Performed the requested maintenance on the magnetics trap, too. It should be a bit more stable now. I still can't believe those amateurs managed to get their hands on the stuff, though apparently they stumbled across it while researching chiral clouds, though I suppose that makes a kind of sense. Even before the Death Stranding, there was evidence that regular lightning storms could generate antimatter, and chiral ones are surely stranger. Sounds like they were able to capture it only once, though. So that's something. Imagine if antimatter was easy to get a hold of. Terrorists would have a field day. Anyway, we've got it stored safely now, and no one's the wiser. I just hope something good comes of it. That's all. You know what the alternative is? Lochner. Okay. So, antimatter storage. They've obviously are using it. It's interesting because he says even before the Death Stranding, there was evidence that regular lightning storms could generate antimatter. So does that mean it can't anymore? Or how is it now? Sounds like they were able to capture it only once, but maybe that was then. But apparently, it's not something that's easy to get a hold of, because obviously if it was, the terrorists would have it and we'd be in a lot of shit. But they have it stored safely and no one's the wiser. Hoping that something good comes of it. That's interesting. I mean, they've recovered all of the antimatter because that was obviously a mission, and that everything went like clockwork for them. But it was obviously to stabilize whatever was going on. Anyone has any more information on that, share it, because I'd be interested to know what that, and probably going back and playing the game and really paying attention to that section, maybe might clear things up. Certainly after I've come and read this, but yeah, any interesting tidbits you might have, go ahead and drop down there for me as well. Moving on, coming up to our last two interviews. This one is the President's Ghost #1. Now, this is from a Bridges former guardsman, and it was 15 years ago, this interview, and it took place at Bridges HQ. And there's no name, it just says Bridges former guardsman. And he states, or she states, this all happened years ago, so can only hope enough times passed that I won't get into trouble for talking about it. But, believe it or not, people used to say that the president's official residence was haunted. Now, bear in mind that most born after the Death Stranding don't go in for any of the supernatural stuff. I mean, why would they? When they know for a fact that BTs not only exist, but are out to get us. For folks like me, though, it used to be different. Even if you didn't really believe ghosts were real or know anything about them, I don't know. Call it a generational thing. I reckon most of the others who worked the detail would say the same if you put the screws to them. Now here's where it gets a bit weirder. This ghost that people whispered about, it was the president's. I saw her myself plenty of times. Pretty much every time I did a night shift, actually. There she was, in the office or a corridor or something, just standing there. I tried calling out a couple of times, but whenever I did, she'd up and disappear. I'd say the ghost, was in her 20s, but I'm not kidding when I tell you she looked like a younger President Strand. And before you ask, there's no way it could have been an intruder. Couldn't have been the president herself either. She was always sleeping whenever there was sighting. And even if she hadn't been, no weird trick of the light could have made her look that much younger. I know it sounds crazy, but after a while, we couldn't help but believe it was a ghost. Either the president's or that of someone else who was her spitting image. I knew I'd catch hell for it, but I just had to tell Di Hardman. It was a security concern, for one thing, and for all we knew, the president was sleepwalking or whatever. I was worried about her, too, truth be told, and I thought it was my duty to report it. Let me tell you, I sure as hell didn't expect the response I got. He told me, matter of fact, that the ghost was actually the president's daughter, Amelie. I didn't even know the president had a daughter. Even he'd only found out recently, he said, and had been waiting for the right time to tell us. Apparently, she suffered from something known as locked-in syndrome from birth. Had been hospitalized for a ridiculously long time. The president hadn't shared it with anyone except her closest confidants either. And then, after 20 years of treatment, Amelie had made a miraculous recovery. She was able to move around again. The president and her daughter had been living apart, but after her recovery, Amelie came to join her mother at the residence. Now, it was kept on a need-to-know basis at first. Just the head of the detail and some of the guards. I've never told anyone else about it until now. It's interesting to see what's happened in the course of this. And clearly, he says he'd obviously seen this happen quite a bit, the president's ghost. Now, I think we're all kind of pretty clear that, if this was indeed something, I couldn't put it past anything happening, in the world of Death Stranding. Nothing phases me anymore. If you tell me that's happened, I'd be like, yeah, sure, that happened. because in this environment, in this realm, this world, I think anything is possible. So for him to say that he saw the ghost, and that it looked like President Strand, and that it was, finding out that it was her daughter, which he didn't know she had a daughter. I just found it very interesting, and also how it was all kept under wraps. But it's like anything. It's we don't know everything that goes on in the White House, or in any political home, whether that's take the palace, take the Buckingham Palace. We don't know everything that goes on. We know what they want us to know. So the fact that you keep things under wraps, I completely get, because you don't want to alarm someone. You don't want to give out premature information, all those sorts of things. But apparently she hadn't shared it with anyone except her closest confidants. And clearly, I would say that Di Hardman knew about it. Whether how recent that was, but the fact that he knew about it, I think, being one of her closest confidants, that surely somewhere he would know that information. So interesting. So let me know what you think about that ghost, and I'm going to move straight on into the President's Ghost number 2, which is the final interview that we'll be dealing with in this episode. This interview is done by Di Hardman. Now, Di Hardman, born John Blake McLean, is the third and current president of the UCA, United Cities of America, and the director of Bridges. I'm sure you all know. And this interview was 3 years ago, and it takes place in Bridges HQ. So, Di Hardman says, when did I first learn about Amelie? Let's see. It was about 10 years ago when the president first told me. There had been rumors circulating among the president's security detail about a ghost in the official residence. Idle talk by bored soldiers, I figured. But then the president called me in and set the record straight. The ghost was her daughter, Amelie. The rumors had made their way to the president, and she was worried things might get out of hand. She explained how Amelie had been suffering from locked-in syndrome ever since she was born, but that she'd finally overcome it and was able to live a normal life again together with her mother. There was a complication, though. Amelie's soul had somehow been born on the beach. And that's why her body suffered from the syndrome. I didn't really understand what she meant, but I understood when she ordered me to keep it all a secret until her reconstruction plan was nearly complete. Until Sam and Amelie were ready to lead Bridges. The repatriate and the daughter with dooms numbers like nobody else, she knew the separatists would be up in arms if they found out about the two of them. So, in this, Di Hardman, 10 years ago, he knew about it. So he was very much aware. And she did set the record straight that the ghost was indeed her daughter. So to them, this was not something that was fantasy, or that it was, though the people who had seen this ghost clearly had been seeing a ghost. And she's saying that, yes, it was my daughter. But I can understand her, as the president, thinking things might get out of hand if they didn't really know what the situation was, trying to put these rumors and things to rest. But what's interesting is now it's clear. Amelie's soul somehow had been born on the beach. But being on the beach, so she was able, because of having dooms, she was able to be connected to the other side. So is that why we see her? Oh my God, this is going to get crazy. This just gets crazy. So I can imagine everyone's there typing your comments down at the end, kind of thinking what's going on. You know, perhaps this should be a live discussion. Maybe one of the episodes we might even do live. Who knows? Anyway, but I just find this is fascinating. And even as someone who, like I said, who's been a part of the game, this is information. It wasn't information I necessarily felt I needed to know in order to play the role, but it's certainly information to know when you're looking back on it now and understanding certain things. But there's no way to have absorbed the amount of information that we've covered. And this is only scratching the surface. These first 13 episodes, 13 interviews, is just scratching the surface. We've got a ton of interviews to get through. There's probably like 200 or something. So hence why we got 10 episodes. But, there's so much information. There's no way to have been able to absorb this, certainly for myself as playing the role, to have take all of that on board and then go into work and then try and remember all these things, because I don't think we necessarily need all this information, but it is great to be able to look through these pages and see the connection and see, like I said at the beginning, was, how all these characters came to be, how these relationships were forged, and, how the characters connect with each other, and also their history and the history of the Death Stranding. All these things, you can see it. And this section, that we've covered today was really all about the people who worked at Bridges. So that's from their perspective and their point of view and their experiences in dealing with these times. And I've absolutely enjoyed going through this with you, and I hope that you guys have found that incredibly interesting. It is something to delve into. It does make you think. It does strike up conversation. It does strike up conspiracy theories. It strikes up so many things. It starts to help you realize what the connection is to our current state of affairs in this world, and also how we deal with things. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this very first episode of Death Stranding's edition, Joy to the Word. I'm so grateful for your support. I'm so happy that we can do this. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed being able to do it. I hope you find interest. I hope you find answers. I hope it sparks you to go and play the game, go out and get the game if you haven't. Like I said, we're only just scratching the surface. So, we've got 9 more episodes to do after this, and there's a lot of information to cover. So I'm going to take this time now to say thank you. I really appreciate your support that you've shown me and to the Death Stranding family. And I'm so happy you could join me. So until the next time, which we will be dealing with in the next episode, what are we dealing with from that point? You know what? I'll tell you then. You'll find out. I had some things mapped out, and I thought, well, I'll share that, but maybe I won't. I won't go into that. You'll find out what the next episode is when it drops. But thank you all so much for joining me for Episode 1 of Joy to the Word, the Death Stranding edition. I am humbly honored to be in your presence and hope that you had a lot of fun watching this. Take some notes and let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. If you're not following me on social media, you can find me on Twitter at TJ84. That's at TEEJAYE 84, or Tommie Earl Jenkins Official on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, Tommie Earl Jenkins. And obviously my YouTube channel. Subscribe and reach out. I'm pretty active on those platforms. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I hope that you have enjoyed this. And I wish you all the best day, the best evening, the best afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm sending you huge, huge, huge love. And the final words for me are keep on keeping on.